All right, so in this video, I'm going to focus on the doors, but we'll talk about the back passenger seat and the dashboard a little bit. But the bulk of the video will be the doors here. And so far, I've only gotten one mostly done, not completely done yet, and I still have one more to do. First off, the dashboard. Not as easy as I was thinking it was going to be to put the leather on here. You definitely do need a really sharp X-Acto knife blade. Basically, just applying the glue, putting the leather down oversized, and going in with the edge of your knife, pressing in and slicing to get that edge to line up properly. Around the openings for the glove boxes here. Really not easy. You need a sharp knife for sure. Every photo I've ever seen of the real car that uses leather shows this piece as either painted in the color of the car body or chrome, and then these areas right here covered in leather. On the kit, they had it the opposite way around. So I decided to do it like the photos that I saw of the real car. Now, this piece of leather is all the same piece as this right here. When I put that on, I used CA glue. I used that stuff here. And I made sure I got some down in here. Then when I was putting the leather on, you're just pressing it down tight until that CA glue grabs. And the leather stretches a little bit. You can stretch it around complex curves like that a little bit without getting issues with wrinkles or not. I mean, obviously it does have its limitations, but it did work around that fairly decently. Obviously I still have to finish the glove boxes, and I have to do the mother of pearl cutout for here, which I have not started yet. Maybe the next video I'll tackle that. I've been kind of putting it off because I've not cut mother of pearl before, so maybe we'll tackle that next video. Next up, the rear passenger seats, and you'll notice how thin it is here, and it looks kind of odd being that thin, but once it's in place, it's not too bad, because when you look at the interior tub here, it sets up from the floor. There's a step here, so it doesn't look too bad being that thin once it's in. The reason why it's that thin is because Pocher. It's just how it is. I did not put the springs in here. If I would have put the springs in here, that seat back, or the seat bottom, would have been way up here. And there's no way those hinge points would have even come close to lining up. Wouldn't have done it. I also cut the springs here thinner. I cut them almost in half, because if I wouldn't have done that, the seat back here would have been way out to here. It would have almost, it would have come to that seam line right here. And it just really would have looked weird. So that got thinned down a bit. That got thinned down as much as it could go. I don't know how other people are doing this. I don't know if other people are just not using the hinges and just gluing the seat back on the seat bottom, or if other people are omitting the springs like I did. I don't know what they're doing. But this is the best way I could make it work. I thought about remaking the hinges like I did on the front seats, but I think it's okay like this. It looks all right. I'm okay with that. So that leaves us with the doors. This one is not completely done. As you can see, it's not attached yet. There are several issues, or a couple of main issues with the doors here. The first issue I ran into was the fact that, a little bit of dust on there. The first issue I ran into was the window would not roll all the way up or all the way down. I'll show you why they had issues with that in a little bit. And when looking at pictures of other models online, where's all that dust coming from? I think it's plastic shavings, but anyways, I'm getting distracted here. The reason why, we'll see in a little bit, but when looking at other models online, almost everybody had their windows displayed, somewhere about like that. And, that's about as high as they would go right here. You have to do a lot of tweaking with this and fiddling with this to get it to go all the way up. And just a little bit of fiddling to make it go all the way down. And again, I'll show you how that is in a bit. I did see one other model online that had them displayed all the way up, and I'm not sure how they did it, but I'll show you how I did it. And I'm assuming that, well, maybe I shouldn't assume that. Maybe if you had 5 Pocher models, maybe some would go all the way up and some wouldn't. I don't know. I can't see how. But anyways, this one, the door is in primer. I won't paint it yet until like last thing. I won't paint it until I figure out how to attach this. Now the instructions have you put a screw here, a screw here, and a screw here. I really did not want screws going into the front face of this, so I'm trying to work out a way to where I can make flanges and screw it into the side. If I can get a screw here, a couple screws here, maybe a screw here, I think that would be my best bet. So I'm in the process of working on that. I'm filming now before it's done because of my schedule for filming. This is about the best time I have to do a video, so I'm taking advantage of it. But I think it's done enough that we'll get the idea. All right, so if we look at the other door pieces, if we take a look at these doors that I haven't done anything to yet, and just identify some of the areas in the doors here. First off, for the windows, and actually, you know what? Let me get back to that later. I want to talk about the leather first. I'm getting ahead of myself, because you have to do the leather first before you do any of the mechanism inside. So let's talk about the leather. The leather was actually pretty easy. The first step is just to take the inside panel and cover all of that with just one piece of leather, and you wrap it around the edges. Now remember, on the other one, I had cut these pieces off. Again, just with some flush cutters like that, just cut those pieces off. I'll do this one later. So then when you cover that with leather, you just wrap all the way around, except for that top edge. Don't wrap it around that top edge. Cut it flush. Cut it flush with that edge right here. Don't wrap it around yet. We'll see why here in just a minute. And when you wrap the rest around that edge, you want it, you know, not too much, maybe 1/8 of an inch. About 1/8 of an inch all the way around. And then, to get these patterns here, what I did was I used the pattern sheet, and I cut out from the styrene, again, this is just to scrap that styrene, a pattern for here, and another piece for these 3 right here, and I just wrapped those. So I just wrapped those and glued those on. I'm going to go ahead and take this off. So, again, you had this piece here, wrapped that in leather, just like you've seen me do a bunch of other stuff, and wrapped it around the edge. Here you can see that first edge wrapped around, and then the other piece wrapped around the edge. Now this one, that top goes all the way around everything, so you can see through the glass here. So this top piece here wraps all the way around, and that's why we didn't wrap it around the first layer, because then you'd have 2 layers of leather here, which would have made it too tight in the opening. Make sense so far? I hope. And then these pieces were just simply wrapped and glued on. Now this first layer of leather I did here, I glued that on with that CA because I wanted it to grab tight around the armrest so that it would contour and follow that shape perfectly around that armrest. Okay, I'll talk about the little flap door here in a minute. Also, you may notice that I did not put the little flap in right here. I looked at several photos of the real cars online, and I did not see one example that showed the little door and the little pocket flap here. And I was kind of on the fence as far as whether I wanted to make that little pocket flap here or not. And, you know, half the time I'm like, yeah, I'll put it in. The other half the time I'm like, no, I'll leave it out. I don't like it. What made the decision for me was I realized after I glued all of this on and it was done, I realized I forgot the pocket. So that kind of made up my mind, the fact that I just forgot it. Now I could rip that off and redo it, but that little pocket isn't important enough to me to do that. The little door opens. That little door opens up a bit. That's perfectly fine for, you know, the little people to put their stuff in. It doesn't close very nicely. I have some ideas on how to make that close better, but I'll worry about that later. That's the least of my worries right now. When I do the other door, I'll just have to make that fit tighter so it pushes tighter better. So the leather part was actually fairly straightforward, fairly easy. Let's talk about the window roll mechanism. The window crank. So if we take a look at this piece, we'll bring that back in a little bit. If we take a look at the other door, and the other pieces, where's my other crank? There it is. I'm going to have to, this is just part of the tree sprue. I got to trim that off for it to fit in the door properly. So when you put these cranks in, put that in like that, you put that in, something like that. They should be straight across horizontal this way. Obviously, if one of them is off, you know, that's not going to work. So they have to be, and what I use is, come on, those little circle marks right there. Make those straight across, make those pegs straight across. I'll put the window on it, make sure it moves nicely. And the thing is when you put all this together, you're supposed to just stack all these pieces on and then put the door halves together, and the door halves being together holds all of those in. But in the process of fitting everything, you're constantly putting them together, taking them apart, putting them together, taking them apart. And as you can see, you just flip that over, they fall off. So if I had to reassemble these every single time I put a door together and take it apart, yeah, that would just drive me nuts. So I wanted a way to hold those in so they wouldn't fall out. To do that, I cut, as you can see here, I cut a piece of that styrene, that plastic, right here, and I drilled holes in it, and I put it over the little post, and it actually worked out pretty nice because the center post here where that pivot's on, that sticks up about the exact same thickness of that styrene. So it just sits on there perfectly flush. And once that was on, I put some solvent, some styrene solvent on top of that, let it melt in a little bit, and then I used the X-Acto knife or something, and I just kind of smushed the black plastic into the white plastic to get a nice solid bond, and that then holds those in, and it does not build any extra thickness up, because like I said, those posts were sticking up that thickness anyways, so it didn't build up any extra thickness. So then you put the window panel in place, and the window panel, as you can see here, that window panel just goes over top of these pegs. Well, again, they don't have anything to keep them from falling off. So I needed to make something so they wouldn't fall off. So I cut these plastic circles here and glued those on. And, you know, that might look like a sloppy circle, but that's a very high-tech, precise, oval, circle-ish shape here. That, yeah, it's good enough. Don't worry about it. I guess I should have made a more nicely shaped circle, but I didn't, so whatever, it's fine. And that held the window in. Okay, I'll get back to this here in just a second. On the other half of the door, this half of the door, you have to fit in the mechanism for the door latch. So to do that, you first take the shaft here, you stick it in like that. That shaft has a little cam on there. That's what pulls the latch back. And then you take the latch, which is this piece. See right there? That's the latch. And the latch has a little spot that goes over, can you see that? That goes over the cam. And so now, it sits down in here like that. And so now when you turn the shaft, that cam pulls the latch back. It's not right now because it can't set in there flat because gravity just kind of makes it flip up weird. But anyways, that cam moves the latch back and forth this way. And there's a spring. The spring connects here to here to always keep the latch out. Like that. Then when you turn the shaft, it pulls that in against the spring. And again, it just sits in here like that. So what they expect you to do is they expect you to put that in. And plus, by the way, once you put that spring on, it just wants to pull that whole thing off. So you have to like hold all of that together or else it just wants to pop off. So you put that together, you put all of these together, just setting in here, then you just slap the two halves together without anything falling apart.
And when you screw the halves together, it holds everything together. But then if it doesn't fit right, you take it apart, you do some trimming or fitting, put it back together, take it apart, put it together. So you can imagine how much of a pain in the butt that's going to be holding everything together while you're trying to fit the door pieces together and assemble the door. So again, that's why I did it this way, to hold all that together, so I can hold it this way. It doesn't fall apart, okay? And what I did here was I boxed that in. Once I got the spring in there, I put a piece of plastic over that to box it all in. And we can see that right here. So I added this around here to box all of that in. And I probably didn't have to, but I put another little piece here just to help box it in a bit. I left a cut out because that hoop of the spring here, I didn't want that really rubbing or chafing, causing any excess friction. And that actually works pretty nice. If we take a look at the mechanism here, if I turn the shaft, so we can get a good view of that. When I turn the shaft, we can see it pulls the door latch back. Hopefully that shows clearly in the camera here. You turn the shaft and it pulls back that latch. So that works fairly nicely, but only when you have it boxed in, holding everything flat. All right. So the reason why the window won't roll all the way up is because even before I added any of that extra stuff, right? So this one, let me dump these pieces out or I'll lose them. Put those away. Again, this piece goes over this way, right? So this window crank right here, that post of that window crank will hit this structure right here that holds the latch. And that prevents the window from going all the way up. So you have to cut that post off as flat as you can. Obviously not so flat that the window falls off. So I cut that flush with that plastic disc that I glued on there, and I sanded it as flat as I could. I actually sanded that to about half the thickness as the styrene I started with. So I sanded that to half that thickness, then reapplied some glue just to keep it from popping off again. Okay? And even after that had been cut flush and sanded as flat as I could get it, it still contacted with this. So I added this piece right here. I added this piece that's at an angle to kind of help guide that up on top of here. And then I sanded this as flat as I could stand to sand it. That's paper thin right here. That plastic here is paper thin. It actually started getting through a little bit right here. You can start to actually see through it here a little bit. That little hole that's here, that's just to accommodate the little post that the spring goes on. That's the only reason that little hole is here. So this is sanded paper thin, and this post down here, right here, that is sanded as thin as I want to get it. That slides right on top of here. That little ramp guides it up on place. And even after all of that, when this is all put together, those pieces being on top of each other pushed it out to a gap of about 64 thousandths, give or take, which is twice the thickness of this. This is about 32 thou. So two of those together filled in that gap right here. And that was the only way I could get that to clear to come all the way up. Now you can see it's got plenty of room, a little bit of wiggle room. I could probably sand it down a tiny bit thinner, but I'm not going to worry about it. Okay. Also, not only did it hit on the front, but it also started rubbing back here because this wall starts curving inwards. So this post here started rubbing here. So I cut that post a little bit thinner. Not as thin, but I cut that post down a little bit. And also, this edge here, I had to sand that edge back quite a bit because trying to roll the window up, the edge of the window would start binding on that edge right here. There wasn't enough clearance in here. So I had to sand from about here back to get enough clearance for that window to come all the way up. And then it would roll all the way up. Now, the reason why it wouldn't roll all the way down is because of this wall right here. This wall right here is too far in this direction. It's too far over this direction. So as I was rolling the window down, the bottom edge of the window would contact and chafe on here, keeping it from going down all the way. So what I did was I moved that wall over. I cut that wall off and I put 2 pieces of styrene stacked on that side of it to move that over. All right, so by sanding clearance here, moving that wall over here, and sanding the posts down so it would clear here and here, that window can now roll all the way up and all the way down. And I really hope this is making sense. This was to fill in the gap that I said, because it pushed that up a bit, that filled in the gap, and then filled in the gap from here, tapering down. I also added some thickness here because this curve was too big, and you could actually see that curve beyond the edge of the interior panel. That curve was actually, if you look straight down this way, that curve was actually sticking out past that panel. So I added some thickness on the inside and sanded that down to follow the curve of that better. Same thing with the back here. This curve was way too far sticking out, so I sanded that down. Okay. Now, as far as attaching this, worst case scenario, I'll put a screw here, here, and here the way it's supposed to be, and I'll paint the screw heads brown to kind of match the leather, but I really don't want to do that. So my plan is, as you can see, I've added a little piece here that I'm still working on. You know, when these are put together, that clears it. So when these 2 panels are put together, it rolls up and down perfectly fine, but when I take them apart, that keeps fouling on that. And yeah, so I could actually cut some of that back here if I needed to. But anyways, the plan is to add a wall here, and along here, and along the front here. And as you can see, that wall fits in like that. So then I could just put a screw in this way. So if I could get a screw in here, maybe 2 here, and 1 here, that should hold this together very nicely. That's what I'm going to go for. Again, it's not finished yet because I took advantage of the time that I had to shoot a video, but hopefully it makes sense. Now the little door right here, it looks like a mess on the back side. The little piece of fabric they gave you just wasn't quite big enough to fill the gap. And again, I did the door differently than what the instructions called for. When you look at the instructions for the door, that little door flap, when you look at the instructions here, they use the same fabric that's used for the top here, and it's kind of like halfway cut out. I mean, it's easy to tell. You just snip a few little areas and you can pop that right out. So a piece of fabric here that glues to the back side of the door, and then to the inside of the little flap, and then the leather glues to the other side of the flap. So the little door is just sandwiched between the leather on the outside and the fabric on the inside. Which works, but it just looked kind of dumb, because then when you opened up the door, there was no side flap in here. There was it didn't really make a pocket. It just was like a flap, but no little side walls in that opening. So I took a scrap piece of fabric, folded it in half, stuck it in there, glued it to the inside of the door, and just glued the edges, holding that open. I don't know if we can even see that very well. I just tucked the edges up inside and glued them in here to make little side walls so it looks more like an actual door pocket. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you can see how I did that. I need to do a better job on the other door to make that fit in better, because once you put that in, it wants to kind of come back out a little bit. Not bad. But I have some ideas on how to make that fit better. But anyways, like I said, I've got the other door to do. I've got this one to do in the leather. And I still have to finish little walls here and here and here. I'm going to try to make that thicker if I can, just so there's more meat for the screw to grab into. And then they should be done. So so I'm going to end this one here. It's getting a little bit long. It's already almost 25 minutes in. So I'm going to end this one here. Hopefully all of this made sense, I hope. Maybe I'll take a few pictures or videos of doing the other door, maybe. I don't know. If you have any questions, please feel free and leave them in the comments. Or if you have any comments, leave them in the comments. Yeah, you know what I mean. So yeah, let me know what you like, what you don't like. If you see that I'm doing anything obviously wrong, or if you have any ideas or whatever. If you had problems, like maybe you already built one and yours didn't roll all the way up because you had the same problems, you know, feel free and share that. Because I am curious to know if they're all like this or just a few. I'm getting the impression that the quality control of Pocher is not, you know, or was not what it should have been. So yeah, the next video, hopefully the next video, will be showing a finished interior with all the doors done, seats installed, and I do plan on shooting some footage on cutting the mother of pearl, because like I said, I've never done it, so I'd like to shoot some video of me learning how to do that, so that if any of you want to do the same thing, then maybe you can learn from any mistakes that I made. So I'll leave it at that. I appreciate you watching. I know this one's a little bit long, but I appreciate you hanging in there. I appreciate you watching, and as always, thanks for watching. One more thing real quick, I almost forgot, but it's kind of important. The handle, the interior door latch handle, looks like this. Since I added extra thickness of the leather and it pushed out a little bit more, this now doesn't fit. It won't reach the shaft. So you have to lengthen that piece here so that it will reach. And here's what it looks like lengthened a bit. Okay, so it's not complicated. It's not a hard thing to do. It's actually pretty easy, but it's just something that if you copy my methods, you're going to have to do this too. They gave you extra handles. They gave you extra door handles and windshield cranks. I think like 2 or 3 extras. So all you have to do is cut a piece of scrap from the tree. In case you didn't know, this thing that all your parts are on is called a tree. This is a sprue or a runner, whatever you want to call that. Just cut off a piece of scrap of this. I mean, there's plenty to choose from. Cut off a piece of that as scrap. Cut it to the length that you need. Drill a hole in the middle. And cut off, that's the part with the hole that goes into the shaft. Okay? It's at a taper, so cut that off so you have a flat surface to work with. And you're just going to bond that on your new extension piece with solvent. Make sure it's a solvent, so it's solvent welded. Will be stronger than glue because this is going to be getting a torsional side load on it. Okay, make sense? So anyways, I just wanted to make sure I pointed it out because I realized after I ended that first time I kind of forgot to mention it. Okay, now I'm done. Thanks for watching.